Good day to you, the general public. My name is Christopher Wilson. I'm pursuing an undergraduate degree in History and Business from University of the Southern Caribbean in Trinidad and Tobago. The reason why I have conducted this speech, Constitution Reform, is that over the years, the Caribbean has not progressed in constitution reform. And I think that by formulating these policies, leaders within the region need to take a stand and look at what is occurring in the region and try to fix it. So far, I've conducted constitution reform for Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago due to the fact that Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago history has a common history in terms of economic, political, and social. However, I've conducted 2 speeches in previous. You could look at Wilson economic speech and Wilson political speech on YouTube. Trinidad and Tobago Constitution, which has governed from the Westminster system. Since 1962, the 31st of August, they have gained independence from Britain. Not much has been amended or ratified in the Constitution to make it more efficient and effective in the Twin Islands. Looking at the first point, which I've conducted 10 points, and the first is parliamentary debate must entail constructive criticism and valuable recommendation or contribution from MPs. How they could achieve this? Point 1, parliamentary president must pass a law for it to be compulsory. Point 2, parliamentary president needs to consult with MPs about hiring experts to conduct workshops on effective communication skills and human ethics, due to the fact that the masses are saying that the way our politicians conducted themselves in the parliament is totally uncivilized and barbaric, and it's time that they need to be more efficient and effective in carrying out their duties. Hence the reason that they are the role model in society and also the leader of a nation, and they would be looked upon by other world leaders based on their intelligence and character in parliament. So I think that they need to look into these 2 points, the parliament, and take it into consideration. Point 2, more power must be given to the president to maintain checks and balances in the parliament. For example, the president must be given the opportunity to veto certain clauses which may seem unconstitutional. Point 1, the only way this could achieve is the opposition party must lobby in parliament for 2/3 of the MPs to vote in favor of it. Hence the reason that the system or atmosphere that created in parliament is more a party politics, whereby if the ruling party has 2/3 of the parliament votes, members in parliament, constitutional, they will be victimized by the governing leader. So I think that this type of uncivilized and autocratic form of behavior need to eradicate, because it's a democratic system and democracy entails transparency, justice, and freedom of expression and thought. Point 3, I think that the parliament should abolish the Privy Council and use the Caribbean Court of Justice as a final court of say. How they could achieve this? 1, this can only be done by proper negotiation between the opposition and the ruling party. Point 2, the Parliament needs to conduct a nation opinion poll on the matter. Point 3, both the opposition and the governing parties need to hire local judicial experts to do a final analysis, synthesize and evaluate on the issue and the CCJ operations to determine its mandate. Due to the fact that the CCJ, which is the final code for other Caribbean islands who are signed on to it, and its location is in Trinidad and Tobago, I think Trinidad and Tobago government needs to take into consideration that the amount of taxpayers' money are being paid to upkeep the CCJ by signing on to it. Hence the reason that the Privy Council is not really effective in carrying out cases within the region, especially Trinidad and Tobago and other colonies who may still have it, because the lawyers are not within the Caribbean and they do not know the old cultural setting within the region. So the CCJ is the main body that could resolve some of those problems. For example, the John Off Commission of Inquiry cases leading to Kola Art situation. What we have found out that over 2 million TT has been paid to John Off, the leading Queen's Counsel, and the case has not resolved, no proper solution. So it's 2 million taxpayers' money gone to John Off and other expenses. So I think that they need to look at this serious and consider these points. Point 4, the establishment of an ethics committee comprised of MPs from both the opposition and ruling party to resolve high-profile cases. For example, all top government security officials must report to the ethics committee if there is strong allegation of corruption. How they could achieve this? 1, both the opposition and governing parties need to take a pattern of the UK Ethics Committee system to determine its effectiveness and efficiency when dealing with high-profile cases, and then they could pass the law. Due to the fact that majority of the leaders who have been politically appointed to different ministries, when there's allegation of corruption, they do not face the judicial system or no sort of investigation has been carried out and effective to deal with such issues. The UK has it and it's functioning efficient and effective for the UK. So in relation to Trinidad, it would be good due to the fact that the corruption index within Trinidad and the wider Caribbean region is at the peak, and that should not happen. So having an ethics committee would be much relevant in terms of dealing with these issues. Point 5, implement laws for speedy trial cases. How Parliament could achieve this? By putting it within the Constitution. 1, the government needs to restructure the law enforcement agency by implementing modernized technology to combat and resolve criminal cases. Point 2, implement laws in Parliament that would punish legal personnel for not being accountable and efficient in executing their duties in a transparent and efficient way, which that entail democracy. For example, the cases that has been piling up within Trinidad and Tobago, it's a lot. And due to the fact that the technology is not modernized, they do not have modernized technology to detect certain crime, in particular fraudulent crime or murders. So that's the reason why majority of the criminals or defendants are escaping the prison, the law, because of poor technology to detect certain acts. So that's an important point you need to look at. Next, point 6. Implement laws for only 2 terms of governance for the Prime Minister. To achieve this, both the opposition and the governing parties need to carefully analyze and evaluate the Westminster system and come up with a solution to end the autocracy form of governance. Hence the reason that the Westminster system within the British colony lend itself to corruption, due to the fact that its mandate or the way how it has been structured is not transparent and is not democratically organized. Because having a PM serving 6-7 terms, that entails autocracy. So 2 terms would be relevant, efficient. For example, the United States of America political system, how it has been structured, the governance, the form of governance, is only 2 terms the president has, and he could only be and stay within that 2 terms by winning the election consecutively. So I think that 2 terms or 3 terms is enough for the Prime Minister. Point 7. Make the Constitution mandatory in all educational institutions. How Parliament could achieve this? MP needs to conduct symposium at various educational institutions about the Constitution and its importance and benefit to the nation as a whole. Point 2. MPs need to conduct public forum about Constitution amendment and reform on the television media, due to the fact that from secondary to tertiary, majority of the students do not know the Constitution of their country, and it's totally embarrassing because we are being governed, every country has been governed by the Constitution and statutory laws. And within the academic circle, in particular the Caribbean, students who are not familiar with the Constitution or do not know it could find themselves in total dismay because they need to know the Constitution. The United States of America, for example, majority of the academic personnel or students within that area know the Constitution to a great extent. Evidence has been proven. Point 8. Implement laws for a specific period of time for MPs to sit in Parliament. The only way this could achieve is that both the opposition and the governing parties needs to do a feasibility study about the issue and come up with suitable recommendation to resolve it. Having MPs winning their constituencies for 2 terms, 3 terms, 4 terms, probably 10 years sitting in Parliament or 20 years is totally ridiculous. That you call autocracy. That's not democratic. For example, the former Prime Minister Patrick Manning, he won his constituency at the age of 24 and now he's probably over 60. So 40 years sitting in Parliament as an MP. That's totally ridiculous. Democratic country and democratic governance does not entail that. So that type of system need to restructure. The next point, 9, enforce the law against police brutality. The only way Parliament could achieve this is that the opposition party needs to lobby strong in Parliament for the governing party to reinforce the law with stiff penalty against law enforcement personnel. Due to the fact that it's stated in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago that it's a democratic country and people have the right to speak people have the right to express themselves, as you may say, and people have the right to being protected by the law, and also law enforcement should not infringe on the privacy. For example, what we have seen in society is that the law enforcement, in particular the police, the way how they normally conduct the patrol and execute their plan, it's totally brutal against civilians who are unharmed. For example, in the papers recently, a couple of years ago, police went into one young woman's home and apparently she was killed, and up to now that situation has not been resolved. So the opposition need to lobby strong in Parliament for this law to be passed. Point 10, implement law for execution of criminals. For example, lethal injection. The only way Parliament could achieve this is that both the opposition and the governing party needs to hire judicial experts to conduct feasibility study on the issue, determine the outcome of first-degree defendant. Now, it basically means that the Parliament needs to look at the situation along with judicial experts and see the leeway or the loopholes that first-degree criminal normally win, and implement the law, the lethal injection system, because the UN claimed that hanging is totally barbaric. Well, it could be, but the lethal injection would be better in terms of executing them in a decent and proper way. The United States of America, which is a democratic country to that extent, they normally carry out their execution by lethal injection. So, by using this form of method or implementing this law, it would solve the country to a great extent. It would reduce the crime rate, because other areas have been looked at, other studies have been conducted, and criminals do not want to change. So the only change is by execution, because if criminals are being sentenced to life in prison based on that, eventually the prison would be overcrowded and they would have an increase in taxpayers' money in terms of feeding them. So the best policy is lethal injection, and that would resolve the whole issue. They would be killed in a decent and proper way, and end of story. So that's all for now, and I would keep you up to date, the general public and MPs, based on other strategies they could take in resolving other issues affecting society. Constitution reform for Guyana. Guyana constitution has been ratified to a great extent, which entails a lot of autocratic laws or clause. And I think that it's time that parliamentary MPs need to take a stand and come together and amend and restructure Guyana constitution that would resolve this whole political crisis from since 1966 on to now. I have 12 points, areas that I think that they should take into consideration and study it properly and make the final adjustment. Point 1. The only way that this could achieve point is that 1. Parliamentary debate must entail constructive criticism and valuable recommendation or contribution from MPs. The only way that Parliament could achieve this is that parliamentary president must pass a law for it to be compulsory. 2. parliamentary president needs to consult with MPs about hiring experts to conduct workshops on effective communication skills and human ethics. Hence the reason that the masses to a great extent are totally fed up and not happy that our parliament has been carried out. The way our MPs are conducting themselves in parliament is totally uncivilized and barbaric. And the masses claim that the only way that they could resolve this issue is by either coming together and looking at the previous parliamentary debates during the Boranum time regime and Chedi Jagan and analyze and evaluate the way how they normally carry out parliamentary debate as opposed to the way that is being carried out now. So they need to look into this seriously. Point 2. Implementation of laws to reduce certain power of the president. The only way that this could resolve is that the opposition party needs to lobby strong against such unconstitutional laws to be ratified and amended. For example, the president has the power to dissolve parliament if 2/3 of the members voted against him as unfit. The next point is that the president normally appoint officials within the judicial system, for example, the chancellor and judges, along with the minority, but the president has more say. So what I'm saying is that the president cannot be sued. So whatever the president lay out, and it has been unconstitutional, the civilians do not have the power to sue the president. And that's not democracy. That you call autocracy. In any democratic system, the president should be sued, and based on thoroughly investigation, if being found guilty, should be removed from his post. In addition to that, the Constitution stated that if the president is unfit, academically or physically, he could be removed. And now you see there that the president has the power to dissolve the parliament if 2/3 voted. So what I see here within the Constitution in Guyana, certain clause, it's totally contradictory. It's contradictory. So MPs, especially the opposition, needs to take this into consideration and lobby for changes. Point 3. Implement legislation for the establishment of local council in various constituencies. This should be allowed within the Constitution. How they could achieve it, both the governing and the opposition parties needs to vote in favor for such clause to be passed in Parliament with immediate effect. For example, within the other colonies, British colonies, it have local councillors within the constituency who normally look after the whole environmental aspect. Guyana does not have any, and that's totally ridiculous and embarrassing. Without local councillors within the constituency dealing with environmental issue or other issues like political issues, what would happen is that the whole system will be fragile and fractured. And I think by having local councillors within these constituencies is very important, because he or she will be able to see the needs of the masses within these constituencies, and they could put forward valuable recommendations and points to the parliament or to local government about resolving certain issues in society. That's the reason why you see society to a great extent within the Caribbean is not up to standard. It has so much social issues and economic issues, because of the councillor are not doing their job properly, they're not carrying out feasibility studies within these constituency in terms of determining the issues affecting society and also valuable recommendation. And also in a case like Guyana, they don't have any. So Guyana opened up to more social and economic issues to a great extent. The next point is public viewing of parliamentary debate on the government television station. The only way this could achieve is that point one, the opposition parties need to lobby in parliament for such act to be passed. Two, they could hold forum discussion on television media about the importance of such act. Hence the reason that in a democratic society, the nation is the government. The government is the nation. And the nation needs to know about the whole political affair of their country, how it has been governed politically, economically, what laws are being amended or ratified. And this is where that the nation will be equipped and know about the whole operation of their countries. For example, other Caribbean countries have these things on the television media. For example, Trinidad and Tobago, they have a parliamentary channel where the nation normally look and be aware of the system about parliament, how it has been governed, what clause or laws have been put forward to be amended. And I think that this is where the opposition needs to take a stand and lobby for such law to be passed, because 3/4 of Guyanese do not know about what law has been passed in parliament or what clause to be passed. For example, if a law to be passed in parliament in terms of probably lethal injection, execution, or state of emergency, the only way they normally know is through the media. And sometimes the media could be biased, or sometimes the media could be lenient on which side. So parliamentary debate viewing on the television media is very critical, because it sensitizes the nation about the governance of the country. And I think that it's very important that the opposition need to take into consideration. Point 5, the establishment of an ethics committee comprised of MPs from both the opposition and ruling party to resolve high-profile corruption cases. For example, all top government security officials must report to the ethics committee if there is strong allegation of corruption. The only way this could resolve is that the opposition and the governing party needs to take a pattern on the UK Ethics Committee and determine its effectiveness and efficiency when dealing with high-profile cases, and then they could pass this law. Hence the reason that a lot of local government officials, even top officials who have been aligned with corruption or allegation of corruption, are not being questioned, not facing the court, or not being investigated to a great extent. And that is not the way our democratic system is supposed to run. It's supposed to be more transparent, efficiency, and effectively. For example, within the Linden protest situation, 2 persons got killed, and from then to now, the Minister of National Security or Home Affairs still remain in that position to a great extent. And those are the people that rely on the nation for votes to be where they are. So I think that that needs to resolve quickly as possible, or else Guyana would lend itself to either unrest for quite a long time, and then leaders would know that civilians totally fed up of corruption, and they lead and civilians would take a stand, like what happened in 1962. The next point is that implementation of laws for proper procurement policy. The only way this could resolve is that the opposition parties in particular needs to lobby and convince the governing party with its strategies for such law to be passed in the House of Representatives. Hence the reason that the procurement policy that the governing party normally execute in terms of assessing and evaluating certain projects or whatever that may benefit the country is not properly structured to a great extent. For example, the hydro project system, the feasibility studies that are being carried out based on what the opposition claim that is not being structured properly, and it has and the cost is way above the setting up. However, within that situation, the opposition need to take a stand and put forward their strategies that how the government could resolve such issue, as opposed to just bombarding the government and nothing has not been passed. Because if the opposition keep on targeting the government and accusing the government on everything, and they're not coming with their strategies to counter-revolutionize the government strategy, well then the country would be at a stalemate, and that is what the situation within Guyana. So the opposition, if they know the best way how to conduct such feasibility study, why they do not take it on their hands and conduct it and put it forward to Parliament so that that strategy could convince the government, or else the nation would always be suppressed. The next point, implementation of law for digitizing the voting system. The only way this could occur is that both the opposition and the governing party needs to analyze, synthesize, and evaluate the digitized voting system in the developed countries and follow suit it. Hence the reason that this is a postmodern world, and technology has been advancing rapidly as ever before, and Guyana's system needs to be eradicated and use the digitized voting system. For example, within Trinidad and other islands, they normally use the modernized way of voting as opposed to the traditional way. And this is where transparency, efficiency, and effectiveness would manifest itself in the digitized voting system, because they won't have no rigging within that system. And all democratic country, as I say, it must have transparency, efficiency, and effectiveness in governance. Point 8. Make the Constitution mandatory in all educational institutions. The only way this could achieve is that MP needs to conduct symposium at various educational institutions about Constitution reform and its importance and benefits to the nation as a whole. Point 2. MP needs to conduct public forum on Constitution amendment on the television media. Hence the reason that secondary to tertiary institution, the student majority do not know the Constitution of their country, and it's totally embarrassing, especially the academic arena, in particular the university setting. And I think that by sensitizing them and educating them, that would be a more civilized society, because when a new set of leaders take over, there would be pressure in terms of making certain laws that may seem unconstitutional. So by educating the nation about constitution reform and enlightening them would make the society more civilized to a great extent. For example, the United States of America, to a far extent, know their constitution. The nation That's the reason why when they normally vote, they do not vote on race or on party. They normally vote on welfare and benefits to the nation. They do not engage in party politics. So I think that this needs to be looked at and taken into consideration by MPs. Next point, point 9, implement laws for a specific period of time for MPs to sit in Parliament. The only way this could achieve is that both the opposition and the governing party needs to do feasibility study about the issue and come up with suitable recommendation to resolve it. Hence the reason that MPs are sitting in Parliament for over 2-3 terms, which may consider probably 15 years, and they are not being removed. So what has happened there is that they develop that form of complacency and they're not active in terms of carrying out their duties in an efficient and effective way. For example, the Prime Minister, Mr. Samuel Imes, has been Prime Minister in Guyana from since 1992 to now, which is 2013. Over 20 years within that portfolio. So you see that it's totally an autocratic system. Democratic system do not entail that type of governance for a long period of time, because within human nature, they become complacent and docile within a position for quite that long time. So that needs to be looked at and taken into consideration. Next point, enforce the law against police brutality. The only way this could resolve is that the opposition party needs to lobby strong in Parliament for the governing party to reinforce the law with stiff penalty against law enforcement personnel. Hence the reason that the Constitution of Guyana in itself, certain clause, stated that civilians have the right to protest, they have the right of freedom of expression or freedom of speech. And what you have seen that when protesters are demanding justice, police normally use tear gases, etc. to remove, but that does not stated in the Constitution. So leaders need to take a stand, because as I say again, protesters or the masses would get fed up and the country could lead a civil war, and it could happen in the future. Nobody have never expect the Arab Spring, and look how the Arab Spring has been evolved to a great extent, and it has evolved with the young people, not old people or middle age. Point 11, implement law for execution of criminal. The only way that this could resolve is that both the opposition and the governing party need to hire judicial experts to conduct feasibility study on such issue. So by implementing laws for execution of criminal using the lethal injection system, it would reduce crime to a great extent, because so much strategies are being implemented in the Caribbean to reduce crime, and it's not working, because people, in particular human beings, when they are bent or forced to do things, don't matter what strategy you use to bring them to reality, they will not. So by using the lethal form of injection would be much easier. Look, for example, within the United States of America, they do not use the hanging system, which may be considered as barbaric, whatever what the United Nations stated, but they use a lethal form of injection, whereby they execute criminals in a decent and proper way. So if this type of system used, it will reduce crime to a great extent, because that's the only way that crime could reduce to a great extent. Because what would happen is that the prison would be overcrowded, and it would trigger a great effect on government expense or budget, and also that will also trigger effect on taxpayers' money, because taxpayers will have to pay more in terms of feeding the criminals who are not willing to change, even though other strategy is used to change. So I think that this system is much more easy and efficient. And that's all for now. And to conclude, I think that leaders within the region needs to take into consideration and be more vocal and efficient in terms of looking at how the Caribbean has been run. The issues have been building up within the region to a great extent, and also the need to look at constitution reform and stop mimicking the nation and do what is right, or else the Caribbean could lead to total unrest for quite a long time if they do not take this matter seriously. Thank you.